Hey guys, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And a quick question before we begin our show today. Are you having as much fun with the 2017 season as I am? I'm certainly loving the first, 7 games of this year, and it's only about to get better from here. You know what the next 2 weeks for us are going to be about on this program. How Georgia can go into Jacksonville and beat those lousy, stinking Gators. We're going to talk about it every single day. It's the one that matters to us more than any other, and it's the one that could set up Georgia for a big run here towards the end of the 2017 season. Let's have some fun here the next couple of days as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, I want you to get the picture of this. I'm sitting here in our DawgNation Daily, DawgNation World Headquarters studios here, and I'm getting ready to begin DawgNation Daily here on this day, and getting everything all lined up, computer in place, notes in place, pen in hand for whatever reason. Well, right before the show begins, one of my colleagues comes into the room and says, "Hey, BA, just want you to pace yourself. You got a lot of time between now and the Florida game 2 Saturdays from now. Make sure you don't kind of come out of the starting gates here too hard." Here's the thing you got to know. We've been talking about this Florida game, the last 50 weeks, every single day, and obviously over the course of the next couple of weeks, with the bye week coming up this Saturday, we're going to talk a lot more about that because, listen, I am incredibly excited. I'm excited about the way this team is playing right now and really looking forward to what we are going to see in Jacksonville in a couple of weeks and the role that DawgNation.com is going to play in all of that, and us here on DawgNation Daily. We'll talk about all of that then. Before that, though, I guess it is probably appropriate to spend a little bit of time on the Missouri game, and I actually don't think this was an insignificant game for Georgia. I think it's the kind of game where Georgia did kind of show some stuff here a little bit. And not all of it perfect, not all of it great. But overall, I think it leads to a really positive story. I think Georgia displayed some things on Saturday that kind of prove this is a team that's growing and kind of prove this is a team that's kind of ready for what comes next. Now, the immediate next is Florida. The next beyond that are some even bigger goals and some bigger opportunities and challenges for Georgia. And what you saw on Saturday is kind of an indication that Georgia's kind of getting ready for some of that kind of stuff. Let me explain what I mean here. The first thing that Georgia showed on Saturday is that it is able to respond when it gets challenged. Now, it is partially a credit to Georgia that it's been challenged so little this season. Since the Notre Dame game, the second week of the year, Georgia really hasn't played a lot of close games. It has won every SEC game leading into Saturday by, 28 or more points. Eventually got an easy win on Saturday against Missouri, but for a while there, Missouri was kind of giving Georgia a little bit of a challenge, showing some of that offense that Kirby Smart had warned us about last week. That Drew Lock can be a pretty good quarterback, and the Missouri receivers can be a handful to deal with. And in the first half of the game, that really showed up, was on display. But overall, Kirby liked the way that his team responded, and he said so after the game on Saturday night.
I thought it was an electric atmosphere. Dog Walk was one of the best it's ever been. They carried us through some tough times. Thought we showed some grit tonight and responded. It's just like a boxing match when you got to be able to take the guy's best punch. And we knew they had a vertical passing game. We thought they had the best quarterback throwing the ball that we would face, along with the best combination of speed.
First of all, I love what Kirby says about the crowd there at the beginning of that comment. I was a big believer that going into the game on Saturday, Georgia had a chance to avoid the same pitfalls that befell Clemson on Friday night. Washington State, who lost as a top 10 team on Friday night as well, the Georgia crowd could really, because it was a home game, because the Georgia crowd has been so good this year, including road games too, by the way, the Georgia crowd could kind of set a tone where Georgia wasn't going to fall in that same trap. Georgia wasn't going to be a potential victim of an upset as a heavy favorite because the Georgia crowd was just going to will them to perform better. And I thought from the word go, the Georgia crowd performed exactly the way that I would have expected them to perform. And I think the Georgia team, as Kirby Smart said there, I think the team did truly respond from that and to that. I also like the word grit there. And grit's one of these things that good coaches seem to be able to instill in their teams, a desire to kind of fight through, I don't want to say adversity because I don't know if this was adversity, but just sort of fight through a challenge and go out and try to punch a team in the mouth. They punch back, and then you punch back even harder. In football, that's kind of what grit is, and Georgia, I think, showed that on Saturday. And, I mentioned Washington State losing on Friday night. You may not care, but that was a top 10 team. And, after the game, Mike Leach was kind of complaining about his team. That's the Cougars coach, and he said, we were just a bunch of front runners. And nobody wants that to be the true in the case of a football team. You don't want to just be front runners. You don't want to just be good when things are going well. You want to be good even when the other team kind of shows up and decides to play a little bit. And Georgia did that on Saturday, and I think it was a really nice thing to prove in the game against Missouri. They could still fight, scratch, and claw and get an easy win when the other team kind of showed up and wanted to play, at least for a little while. And the other thing that I think the game against Missouri also shows is that this is a Georgia team that's capable of winning in more ways than just one. We've seen this team win by playing dominant defense and running the ball. But on Saturday, the defense got challenged more than it has really in any other game, and Georgia had to respond with its own offense. And when asked to do so, Jake Fromm and this Georgia offense was definitely up to that challenge, and Kirby talked about that as well.
I thought that was probably the sloppiest game as far as organizationally and the things we got to do to be a great team. But I don't want to diminish what that offense just went out there and did, because they executed well, they ran the ball well, they threw and caught the ball well. Jake made good decisions. I thought they grew up from a passing standpoint.
Yeah, listen, if you're thinking about the Georgia offense as being this sort of one-dimensional thing that is only about running when it can and not about throwing the ball, afraid to do that, then you're living the past. I'm talking about the very recent past. You're 2 or 3 weeks behind here. The internet has evolved a lot since then, and the stats that Georgia's kind of been putting out there on games over the last couple of weeks give an indication. This is a Georgia offense getting some confidence in itself. And this is a Georgia offense that I believe in the latter stages of October here and the month of November is going to do a whole lot better job of keeping pace with its defense than maybe you would have thought during the month of September. That's the other thing this game proved, is that it's not just the Georgia defense that strikes fear in the hearts of its opponents. A lot of these coaches, including Jim McElwain for the next couple of weeks, are going to spend a lot of time game planning for what you do against the Georgia offense that all of a sudden is starting to show a little bit of teeth. And speaking of McElwain in Florida, I think the third thing that the game against Missouri probably shows you is that Georgia really is ready for this game. And y'all know I am. Y'all know how much this Florida game means to me, and we're going to have a lot of fun with that. But on the serious part of it, it's a game where I think Georgia fans are just really hungry to see the Dogs kind of go out and end what has been a really unfortunate streak and really an unfortunate couple of decades. Well, this Georgia team looks like the kind of team that's more than capable of doing that. And I want to play you one more clip from Kirby Smart. And at first, this may not sound like a clip about the Florida game. But when you listen closely, you hear what the message, I think, from Georgia coaches has been to the players all year long and what it's going to be here over the next couple of weeks, and that is something that you take with you to Jacksonville. Kirby Smart was asked about some struggles running the ball early in the first half, and Smart kind of laid his philosophy on the line, and it's a philosophy a lot of Georgia fans themselves have been buying into recently. Apparently the Georgia players, too. Here's how Kirby Smart answered about not being able to really run the ball as well as they wanted to in the first half, but kind of seeing that kind of come to fruition in the second half.
I keep telling y'all, it's hard to run the ball in this league. And early, you got to earn it. You got to get the hard yards. You got to pound it. And you got to chop the wood. I mean, if you just keep chopping, it'll usually pay off in the fourth quarter, especially with the backs we got.
And keep chopping is really kind of the unofficial phrase that a lot of Georgia fans have adopted for this team this year. Every single day, every single week, every single opponent. Just keep chopping. Don't worry about what the media's saying good about you. Don't worry about what the media's saying bad about you. Don't pay attention to what DawgNation Daily or anybody else is talking about. Just keep going to work, keep chopping, keep getting better each and every week. And in fact, here is that a very simple message sort of distilled down to its basic essence. And this is what Georgia takes with it to Florida.
You got to chop the wood. I mean, if you just keep chopping, it'll usually pay off.
There have been a lot of Georgia teams in the past that were not wood choppers. They were headline readers, and they were attention seekers, and they were, I hate to say it, maybe front runners a little bit, that kind of only were happy when things were going well and didn't respond to adversity very well. It didn't stay focused as well as they could. I get the impression this Georgia team is not that way. And I get the impression the next couple of weeks, as we look ahead to Florida, are going to be very fun here on DawgNation Daily, because I know the fans are ready. I think come next Saturday, we may see a team that's also ready to kind of go out there and get it done versus the Gators. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good to have you with us. A lot of ways you can find DawgNation Daily, no matter how you found us. We're just glad you're here. You can watch us on video each and every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the DawgNation Facebook page. One of the cool things about that is it gives us a chance to interact together, including some questions and comments. We'll do that throughout the morning here on DawgNation Daily today. You can also listen to us on the radio every day at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we're in podcast form on iTunes, SoundCloud. We post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. Thanks so much for being with us here today on DawgNation Daily. And if you are a regular listener to DawgNation Daily, one of the things we've been doing every single day for virtually the entire last year is counting down the days of the game that's going to take place 2 Saturdays from now. It's our Gator Hater Countdown, and it is 12 days away. Georgia goes to Florida for the cocktail party in 2 weeks. We're getting excited about that. And one of the things that we're excited about, by the way, is our DawgNation invasion to Jacksonville on that day. Listen, here's the thing you got to understand about the DawgNation invasion. We did one to South Bend, but not everybody got to be a part of that. We wanted to do one for the Florida game that gave more people a chance to be involved. We're able to kind of unveil more of these details. We'll show you this on the screen here if you're watching us on video. If you're listening, I'll tell you all about it. We're going to do a big DawgNation Invasion tailgate. Now, it's going to be 10 a.m. on game day. You don't see the address on the screen here, but I'll make sure I tell you more about that. It's the touchdown lot. It's part of the tailgaters parking. It's the touchdown lot. It's near Gate 6 of the touchdown lot off Bryan Street. That's where we're going to be, and we'll talk to you a whole lot more about that in the days ahead. But that's where it's going to be for the DawgNation Invasion tailgate. It starts at 10 a.m. On game day. We're going to do a Dixie Vodka Lounge. The Dixie Vodka Lounge is for those 21 and up, of course. But we're going to do a Dixie Vodka Lounge. You can do a little Dixie Vodka tasting there. It's going to be a nice, cool thing, courtesy of our friends at Dixie Vodka. We're going to have 4 televisions set up. I'm going to be there. Jeff Santel's going to be there. We'll watch a lot of the early games together and just hang out and have a good time. And while supplies last on that day, we're also going to give away a brand new Gator Hater T-shirt. Now, these are brand new. These are not to be sold. This is a giveaway, courtesy of our sponsors for the event. Gator Hater T-shirt. It is in red. It looks great. We have a limited number of those, but if you can come by and see us there on that day, we are going to give away some red Gator Hater T-shirts, courtesy of our sponsors, while supplies last. Now, speaking of our sponsors, of course, one of the sponsors that makes this all possible are our friends at R.S. Andrews. And listen, I've been telling you about this for a while, and now it is true that the cold weather season is starting to be here. If you live in Georgia where I live, it's actually going to be, fairly cold at night this week. That means that furnace is going to start to be tested. Is your furnace working as well as it needs to be? And can you trust it to get you through the cold weather season? Well, the best way to find that out is to get one of those guaranteed $99 furnace tune-ups from our friends at R.S. Andrews. Now, you should know Dari Payro over there at R.S. Andrews, a huge dog fan. He's as excited as anybody about the big season happening for the Georgia Bulldogs, but he's also looking ahead to the cold weather season, and he wants you to stay warm during that cold weather season. So get their $99 furnace tune-up. It'll guarantee and keep you running all winter long. Their clean screen, trained and timely techs will give your system that thorough check. They'll make sure it's running. You can check them out online for the $99 furnace tune-up at rsandrews.com. All right, I've got a really good idea for the Florida game in a couple weeks. I'm going to tell you about more about that coming up. Before that, though, let me kind of get into this. I mentioned a moment ago that I thought that, for a lot of the people who are kind of stuck in the past on this being a Georgia offense that can only run the football and this being a Georgia offense that is limited what it can do, needs its defense to have a big game, not asking too much from the quarterback. I mean, folks, how many weeks do we have to see big improvement for Jake Fromm before that as a storyline just kind of starts to slip away and move away? And what you're seeing from Fromm right now is a young man who's getting better. And one of the things that Kirby Smart said on Saturday night is one of the reasons why that Fromm is getting better is because he's starting to believe in himself and starting to gain that all-important confidence that allows you to kind of go out and succeed at the SEC level. Here's Kirby on Fromm.
A little more confidence, making good decisions. He understands the game. He knows where to go with the ball. He sees coverage as well. Made a mistake, made a poor decision, but quarterbacks are going to make those, and hopefully he learns from it and continues to grow. But he's getting better as a player, and he's putting us in the right plays. And the guys caught the ball. That was the biggest difference. They threw and caught the ball when they had the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Georgia fans, I would imagine, have an incredible level of growing confidence in Jake Fromm. Kirby Smart right there just talked about Fromm's confidence growing. I think the Georgia fans' confidence in Fromm's also growing here as well. He had to play a lot on Saturday without Terry Godwin, and Godwin's been a really comfortable receiver for Fromm this year. And on Saturday, Fromm had to kind of do without Terry Godwin a little bit. Was still able to get other receivers involved, able to get Javon Wims involved. We saw Riley Ridley catch a touchdown. We saw a lot of that happening on Saturday, and it's the growing confidence that Fromm has in himself that I think is allowing other fans to believe this is the kind of quarterback that you can win with right now at the SEC level. This is not a limited freshman anymore who you have to kind of game plan around. This is a guy that can be a big part of the Georgia game plan, and Georgia's looking pretty good right now at the quarterback position. And, of course, there was the back-and-forth nature of the first half in this game a little bit. Georgia would score, Missouri would respond, and you kind of went into halftime feeling like Missouri might hang around here a little bit. And then in the third quarter, that's when things started to change for Georgia. You were able to see DeAndre Swift kind of get off off, and he has the big 71-yard touchdown run, or I should say long run, that sets up the Sony Michel touchdown. But it was the big run from DeAndre Swift that kind of once again showed you what kind of player he is, but also in this game, I think, enabled Georgia to kind of skate to an easy victory in the second half of this game, and that's the reason why we're going to make this our Aldi game-saving moment, courtesy of Aldi, the supermarket that saves you money. And listen, right now, Aldi's got more fall for all. Aldi offers low price on all your favorite fall favorites, so you can spend more time savoring the sights of the season. Simply smarter shopping at Aldi. And congratulations to DeAndre Swift, whose 71-yard run to set up the Sony Michel touchdown was our Aldi game-saving moment for today. And after the game, Kirby Smart talked about DeAndre Swift.
DeAndre Swift continues to be a great change-up asset to our offense, catching the ball in the backfield, running the ball, and he's a hard worker. And yeah, I thought he did a better job tonight of picking up pressure on third down.
Yeah, listen, there's no question about it that DeAndre Swift looks like more than just a good player. He looks like more than just one of the nation's most capable third-string running backs. He looks like an explosive player in his own right. He brings the wow factor in a way that maybe nobody else in the Georgia roster can kind of bring together on that big run. And I know he had the leap play where he jumped over the defender that got called back, but he kind of showed you that a little bit as well. So fun stuff from Georgia against Missouri. Looking ahead to Florida over the next couple of weeks. It's great to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily, and it wouldn't be a Monday without Chip Towers. Let's welcome him back to the program right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And, of course, we will say hello to Chip Towers here on DawgNation Daily. Good to have him back with us on the program. And, Chip, before you joined us, one of the things I talked about was what Georgia was able to show on Saturday night. One of the things I thought Georgia did show, and I kind of explained this, is how it would respond when it was challenged. And Georgia did get challenged in the first half. And in your mind, was it good for Georgia to kind of be in a game where the other opponent kind of fought back a little more than Vanderbilt and Tennessee probably did? What was your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's kind of where we are with this team, Brandon. They really have, grown a lot since the beginning of the season, and obviously they were coming into that contest having won 3 SEC games by 100 points or an average of 33 a game. I think definitely it was good to experience, I should say, some adversity, and Georgia, I think, responded to it nicely as well. But, of course, it exposed some weaknesses. You're sitting there tied up 21-all midway through the first quarter against, a Missouri team that might not win this year. I don't know, in the SEC. But they, certainly could do what Kirby Smart said they could do. He said that their vertical passing game concerned them, and they got back deep a little bit, and it was kind of good for Georgia to feel what that was like. They still haven't trailed in Sanford Stadium this season, which is a good thing, but they came close to it, and they certainly answered in the second half. And when you look at it from a defensive standpoint, Georgia actually didn't play all that bad. I mean, you gave up 126 yards and 2 touchdowns on 2 plays. Otherwise, they were pretty good, but that's kind of a big otherwise,
Yeah, and I also on Jake Fromm as well, who kind of paced things for the Georgia offense. I think that early September, Chip, is a long time ago now, and the young man that was kind of thrust into action against Appalachian State and then, frankly, probably struggled a little bit against Notre Dame, I don't think he would call that a very good game. I don't think Jim Chaney, Kirby Smart probably thought the game in South Bend was that great for Fromm. That's a long time ago now, and this is a young man that I believe is playing not only like he himself is confident, but he got to instill some confidence in the part of his play caller, Jim Chaney. Fromm right now looks like the kind of quarterback you can win with. Do you agree with that?
Well, I actually think you touched on 2 big things right there. I mean, I think between the belief of Jim Chaney and the belief of his teammates has really taken Jake Fromm to another level. I mean, he's won over this team, Brandon. It was just so evident after the game Saturday. I mean, it's been evident all year, but when you come through like that, there's a belief, a confidence that's not only inherent to Jake Fromm, but to his teammates, and then certainly to play caller Jim Chaney. And we've seen that actually grow all year. I mean, I thought it was the Mississippi State game that I really saw Jim Chaney start, kind of digging kind of deep in that playbook. Georgia's running a lot of sophisticated motions and stuff that they can kind of transition pretty good from being a pro-style team to spreading it out and doing some zone read stuff. Jake has got really good at reading that defensive end and decided when to keep it. He has 3 touchdowns on the year now and positive rushing yardage. This has really been a neat thing, for lack of a better word, to kind of watch the growth and development of Jake Fromm along with Georgia's offense with him. Georgia's offense is growing with Jake Fromm, and the possibilities are pretty impressive at this point.
I don't want to fixate on this issue, but it seems like the appropriate thing to ask a question about the fact that Jacob Eason doesn't get into this game in the fourth quarter. Is there anything to read from that, from Kirby Smart, read into it if you're a fan of Jacob Eason, that even in a pretty comfortable game for Georgia in the fourth quarter, Eason doesn't get on the field? And I believe this is the first game in his Georgia career that he hasn't played in at all, other than the ones he was clearly injured and not able to play in. I mean, any comment about why Eason doesn't go in there in the fourth quarter?
Well, if you read DawgNation, you would read something into that, because I wrote about it Saturday night, and I thought it did make a little bit of a statement. Now, the circumstances in the game, especially on that last possession when Georgia's essentially running out the clock and all Jake Fromm is doing is handing off. I can kind of understand not bringing him in that situation. It might have been different if you were a little bit more comfortable early in the fourth quarter. But, yeah, I mean, I have seen the transition, have witnessed the transition. In my opinion, from my observations, it's Jake Fromm's team. And now there's no longer any ors or question marks in the depth chart. It's Jake Fromm's team, and Jacob Eason is the backup. And you turn to him if needed, and or if warranted, if you have enough time. I think it's important to get your backup in the game whenever possible, because you just got to keep those guys sharp. But maybe with a week off between this and the Florida game, it just wasn't all that necessary. I mean, Kirby did a few curious things. He goes for 2 there in the fourth quarter as well. Because he wanted to be sure and be up 4 scores, even though the math doesn't quite work for me. But anyway, I thought it was a bit of a statement, and I think we all know what the line is now. I mean, this is Jake Fromm's team, and Jacob Eason will get in there and help him out when needed.
I think this is one of those moments over the course of the next couple of weeks that could be a little frustrating for fans, given that obviously Terry Godwin is a big part of Georgia's offense. He is the receiver that I still think that Jake Fromm's the most comfortable with, and with him having what's been called a rib injury and not a whole lot said about that on Saturday night other than we think he's going to be fine. I'm guessing the next few days, now there's not going to be a press conference today, so Kirby won't be talking about it all today, but on Tuesday, I guess Smart's going to speak to the media again. My guess is you won't hear much from him on the Godwin front there either, and Georgia fans may kind of go towards the Florida game not really knowing too much about how healthy Terry Godwin is going to be. Is that also kind of your read on this situation, that while he's important, we may not get a lot of details here?
Yeah, we're not going to get many details. I mean, I think it's, Kirby's made it pretty clean. Anytime he has a situation like this, he's going to try to use it to his advantage, and so he's going to keep the Florida Gators guessing. Now, just the fact that they came Saturday and said he thinks he's going to be fine. I mean, they do x-rays there at the stadium, and they trotted him off, Godwin off right away, right after that injury. You could tell it was his left ribs. You could tell he took a shot in there, and what you're looking for is cracks. Is there a fracture of the broken ribs over there? And the fact that he came out and said, fine, I may be reading too much into it, tells me that those x-rays were probably negative, but, again, we're guessing. We don't know. But that's the type of situation that, again, everything falling in line for Georgia. I mean, having some time off this week, I would imagine you would keep Godwin out, let him heal up. At the very least, he's got bruised ribs, and any of us who've had that type of injury knows how painful that is, hard even to sleep. But, he should have 2 weeks here to heal up. They have flak jackets they can wear and all that kind of stuff, and just knowing Terry Godwin like I know him, if it's not, fractured, broken ribs, I certainly think he'll try to go. In the meantime, Mecole Hardman, kind of answered a lot of questions in that game. He actually said after the game, where he ends up with, I believe it was 172 all-purpose yards, that he knew he needed to step up with Terry Godwin out, and you also saw Riley Ridley step up. Georgia's wide receiver core is in pretty good shape. I've kind of maintained all along. If Godwin's not there, that certainly hurts you, but Georgia does have some pretty good depth there where everybody just moves up a spot. And I think they can still operate the way they need to as an offense.
And, Chip, I would add to that, you also saw Charlie Warner get a catch on Saturday, and he kind of got into the act. You know, a lot of Georgia players hurdled Missouri players on Saturday. One of the guys that did that was Charlie Warner, and I know that's another guy. You know, you mentioned Riley Ridley caught a touchdown. You get asked a lot of questions about Ridley. When is he going to get more involved? You get asked a lot of questions about Warner. Is he going to have a big role on this team? And, well, you know, it was a day on Saturday to kind of get some of those guys involved, and you really kind of see just how deep this team can be from a potential playmaker standpoint. Now, there's still some trusted weapons, and Godwin may be near the top of that list, but there are a lot of other guys that could potentially have their moment in the sun if called upon as well, and I thought Warner is probably another name to add to that list.
Yeah, I think Georgia could probably have a pretty good hurdle relay team after watching that game Saturday night, and Warner's probably was the most impressive. I mean, he's such a tall guy as it is. He just stepped over that poor little defensive back who was, you know, going for his legs, as I think any of us would when we have a 250-pound, you know, tight end trucking down the sideline toward him. You know, but he is Charlie Warner is a guy that I've always said. I mean, he really did. He ran hurdles in high school at a state championship level, and you know, he can fly too. And people have asked me like, where are the tight ends? Where are Isaac Nauta? And you know, they're involved in the running game and blocking for the running game, and you just really haven't needed them. And that's what happened Saturday night. You know, Georgia had to deviate from a run-oriented team to a pass-oriented team, or at least they were almost perfectly balanced before they had to run the clock out in the fourth quarter. And Charlie Warner's one reason for that. Riley Ridley got involved, and Jake Fromm, those third-down conversions in the first half were all world. I think he was 5 for 5 on third and longs to start the game. So, yeah, Georgia's got a lot of good offensive momentum, and we're starting to see some different people, Mecole Hardman, Charlie Warner, some others step up.
What do you think about the mindset that Kirby seems to be, at least the public-facing version of that when it comes to Georgia? On the one hand, he will allude to goals at the end of the season. He's sort of not afraid of championship expectations, but he also kind of maintains the one day at a time, you know, keep chopping wood, attack each day, you know, the kind of stuff that you hear all coaches say. But I think right now, at least based on what you're seeing on the field and what Kirby's saying publicly, that he's actually splitting that difference pretty well. He's not afraid of the fact that there is potentially more than just a regular season at the end of this path for Georgia, but he's not fixating on it too much. I kind of like the way that he's sort of striking that balance. Do you agree? You obviously spend more time closer to him than I do.
Well, that's a little bit of a change, that he's starting to come out a little bit more and say things like, if we're going to be the team we want to be, you know, if we want to do what we want to do, those kind of, that's about as close as you'll get Kirby to say it. You know, he won't say championship. He probably can't even physically. It's like one of those 30, like, gee, he won't be able to say championship.
But not to cut you off, and I don't mean to cut you off, but you would agree that by saying that, hey, the team we want to be, the things we can do, that's at least a wink and a nod towards the thing that we know could be at the end of this road, right?
That's right. I mean, there's nowhere to hide anymore. Look, Georgia's number 3. They're up there. And, you know, I was sitting here looking over the week. Actually, Saturday I wrote, all the different teams in the country that were also in play for playoff spots, were still undefeated and that kind of stuff. And do you realize, I believe, 5 or 6 of those guys went down. I didn't realize until this morning. I was like, wow, San Diego State lost too. I kind of missed that one.
Right.
And so, it's like the parting of the Red Sea here for Georgia. So, yeah, there's, you got to admit it sooner or later. And even the Florida loss, now they're sitting there 3-2, and they got some big problems. And it's just kind of wide open for Georgia. So there's nowhere to hide about that. You have to, sooner or later, you got to address it. And that's what Georgia's playing for now. They're playing for an SEC championship and a national championship. And whether you, verbalize that or not, that's a fact.
And, if you don't mind, I want to ask you a little procedural question here. In between anything that does happen later on, you've got what's going to happen this week, which is a bye week. Kirby Smart's called it a work week. But specifically, what is this week like for Georgia? Is the practice is just as intense? What happens on Saturday, typically on bye weeks? As a guy who's covered a lot of Georgia teams and maybe different coaches treat bye weeks differently, what can we expect to be happening behind closed doors for Georgia here over the course of the next 7 days?
Yeah, well, all due respect to Kirby, and say it's a work week. That's for any team that has a bye week. In fact, they'll probably go really hard. So the biggest advantage you get on an off week is really Sunday and Monday. you get a chance to get your legs all the way back under you. I'm not 100% sure, but they won't do much today. They'll probably go real hard on Tuesday and probably Wednesday as well. But the big difference is on the weekend. They'll be off, and that's the one time you really have a chance to take advantage of the off day, because you'll try to get ahead. I imagine they'll do some work on Friday as well, even though they don't have a practice. I imagine they'll probably do some classroom work on Friday, getting ahead in the game plan for Florida, but then really getting your legs up under you, not having to play on a Saturday. That's where you'll get an advantage, and then you'll probably be a day early during the week on your implementation of your game plan and everything. So, you should be, Sunday will be like Monday will be like Tuesday, et cetera, through the week, which is great when Georgia has to travel like it does to Jacksonville.
Well, let me speak to you about Florida before I say goodbye to you. Do you think this Georgia team, because of Kirby Smart and his mindset, do you think it's more prepared for the mental challenge of facing Florida, given the fact that Georgia's won so little in this series for the last, 3 decades?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe those kind of things reside more in the fan base than they do in the players. And look, really, the closer I look at this team as they go along, it's all about those 4 seniors, or let's say 5 seniors, Dominic Sanders as well, but, certainly Davin Bellamy, Lorenzo Carter, Nick Chubb, and Sony Michel all made conscious decisions to come back rather than turn pro when they could have gone ahead and taken the money, I'm sure they all would have made a roster. I don't think there's any question about that. But they did not want to leave the way they left last year. And for me, I mean, Nick Chubb especially, it's the Tech game that Georgia got away. They got away from Georgia last year. It's the Florida game. It's games like this, the Tennessee game, that you can really kind of, see just a different kind of glint in his eye. And I just think they have some things they want to rectify. And I think that's what's helping this team. The senior leadership on this team is what's driving this bus. And that's why I don't think that stuff is really, the matchups favor Georgia. Florida is I talked to Pat Dooley this past week. He kind of thinks they're sort of done. He does not expect those 9 suspended players to come back for the Georgia game, that those guys are out for the year. He's pretty sure. And, they're a beat-up team, and they got some real issues on the offensive side of the ball. So there's no excuse here for Georgia. It doesn't matter what's happened in previous years. It's all about this year. Georgia's got a lot on the line, and they're supremely motivated based on that senior leadership.
Chip, it's great stuff. We appreciate your time here today on DawgNation Daily. We'll look forward to reading more from you throughout the week here on DawgNation.com. Appreciate your game coverage from Sanford Stadium on Saturday night, and we'll talk to you next week. I guess you may already be in Jacksonville when we speak to you next week, by the way, or at least wherever it is that you're staying. So we'll look forward to talking about the cocktail party next time you're with us.
All right, we'll catch up with you then.
Good stuff there from Chip Towers.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Appreciate Chip Towers here on DawgNation Daily. Always fun with him on the program, and fun to start looking ahead to that Georgia-Florida game. And it's always cool to talk to Chip about that, because Chip has been to so many, and he's seen so much. And when you ask him about, hey, how is this relatively new coach going into his second Georgia-Florida game, how's he going to approach the cocktail party differently than it was done for 15 years under Mark Richt, or a handful of years under Jim Donnan, or a few years under Ray Goff? That's the guy who kind of lived through all of that. And, obviously there's a whole week to talk about this kind of stuff, and really 2 weeks to talk about this kind of stuff. But I'm a big believer that for a long time, Florida's dominance in this series could be easily explained. There was a long period of time which Florida was just a better team and the better program. Somewhere, though, in the 2000s, that kind of changed, where Georgia was having the better overall seasons. It was winning SEC East championships. It was going to the SEC championship game, winning some of those, but still in a lot of those years losing to Florida. And at that point in time, it became more of a mental deal than just a physical deal. And you can't tell me that some of that wasn't weighing on Georgia in the latter part of the first decade of this century, for instance. Yeah, the fans thought about it more, but you couldn't tell me that it didn't also impact the team a little bit. I think that Kirby Smart, because of his attack each day type mentality and keep chopping wood type mentality, I do think he is a coach that is probably uniquely equipped, at least compared to maybe some of what Georgia's had in the past, to block out the past failure. Because the truth is, these young Georgia players don't remember those games anyway. They may never have even heard of Steve Spurrier, and that lack of awareness about how bad things used to be, probably a good mindset for this Georgia team to take into the game next Saturday. By the way, we'll make this our SEC through and remind you to check us out on AT&T SEC Country Live this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the SEC Country Facebook page. And also, when you think about Jacksonville, let me tell you about this as well. Coming up next Tuesday, we're going to be at the Marlows in Brookhaven for our DawgNation Invasion Big Game Preview. We'll be at the Marlows in Brookhaven, getting you ready for that. It's going to be 6 to 8 p.m. next Tuesday night. That's October the 24th, and it's 3575 Durden Drive in Atlanta. Go ahead and put that address into your GPS, your Waze, your navigation, however you get there. 3575 Durden Drive in Atlanta for the Marlows in Brookhaven. We'll be there from 6 to 8 p.m. next Tuesday night talking about the cocktail party and getting really excited about that game. And you know what? If you're going to talk about the cocktail party, how about you have some of those craft cocktails there to Marlowe's? That's a great way to do that. We'll look forward to seeing you there. And one of the things we'll talk about when we're there is the Florida loss to Texas A&M on Saturday night. And as Chip said a moment ago, longtime Florida writer told him that Florida just may be done. My guess is they'll play hard against Georgia still, but you saw against the Aggies on Saturday night, this is a Florida team that has some legitimate problems. Felipe Franks is not an impressive quarterback. I know Tyree Cleveland tried to give it a go on Saturday, but this is a team with a real absence of playmakers, a real absence of really kind of any kind of offensive identity to speak of whatsoever. Now, I think the Texas A&M is probably a pretty good team, but this was not a good day for Florida, and I think so far Florida has proven to be just as mediocre as I thought they would be at the beginning of the season. But if I was right about Florida, something that I was wrong about was Auburn. I thought that Auburn was going to win the SEC West, and now, given just a first conference loss here, but another loss for Auburn, they're starting to maybe not look quite like the team that I thought they would be. Now, I'm not panicking on Auburn yet. In terms of my prediction, obviously, as a host of DawgNation Daily, it's always kind of nice to see Auburn doing poorly, but in terms of my prediction, I'm not going to panic and run from that yet necessarily just because they lost to LSU on Saturday, but this was not a good win. For a program that was looking for its first win in Death Valley since 1999, this was a bit of a stub toe for Auburn here, and a lot of that's going to be laid right at the feet of Gus Malzahn. Another poor offensive performance, and all of a sudden, a big change in conversation. You go from thinking that Gus Malzahn's leading one of the nation's top teams, and Ed Orgeron's on his way to being a disaster in his first year. All of a sudden, LSU's won 2 straight. It's Gus Malzahn who's taking a lot of the heat and a lot of the criticism coming off the game against LSU. It's kind of funny how things can change in the SEC. One of the things, though, that does not appear to be changing is the situation at Tennessee. Another bad loss for the Vols, this time to South Carolina. Offense hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 games. Am I right about that? I mean, just a mess of a performance offensively, including negative yardage for the Vols once they kind of got down near the goal line and a chance to punch it across. Not able to do that. You have to wonder here if Butch Jones' days as Tennessee coach are just numbered. I would guess that he's going to lose his job. Maybe you don't want to put an interim coach out there against Alabama. That's the opponent this week. But Tennessee already like a 34-point underdog to Alabama. What a mess in Knoxville. And Butch Jones would not appear to be getting another chance to kind of clean all that up. One more quick SEC story let me get to. Speaking of Alabama, they do roll versus Arkansas on Saturday. And, the Crimson Tide continue to look impressive. Damian Harris maybe starting to put himself in the Heisman Trophy conversation here a little bit. Alabama is a force to be reckoned with. And you almost have to wonder, is it just inevitable that now that Alabama, a juggernaut from the West, Georgia maybe a juggernaut from the East, these two teams will collide in the SEC championship game? But as far as Saturday's game against Arkansas goes, whether you're taking Austin Allen out and putting in the new quarterback, Brett Bielema does not appear to have a lot of answers in Fayetteville at the moment. That was another ugly game for the Hogs, and we'll make that your SEC through. All right, coming up in just a moment here on DawgNation Daily, I want to talk to you about some of the Georgia injury situations. I thought that Chip Towers had some interesting things to say a moment ago about Terry Godwin. We'll talk to you more about that here in a moment. But before that, let me pitch an idea to you and see if you think this makes some sense. And I want to hear from some of the people who are with us in the room on this as well. So we got 2 weeks to get ready for the game against Florida. And I know that a lot of you dislike Florida just as much as I do. Now, I'm very much on the record about this. We've done the Gator Hater Countdown over and over again here on DawgNation Daily. I've said that a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. I'm a big believer that, and I've tried to make my case as to why, that the Florida rivalry ought to rank above all the others for Georgia. Good things come when you beat Florida, especially if you can find a way to beat them in bunches here. And I know some of you, many of you, agree with me on that statement, and many of you have taken the Florida hatred to an all-new level. So here's what I think we might try to do here over the next few days, and some of y'all weigh in on this. Tell me if you think this is a good idea. I'm talking to the people on the other side of our glass here that kind of help make sure we stay on the air. What if we did a Gator Hater roll call over the course of the next couple of weeks? And if you've got a picture of yourself wearing one of our Gator Hater T-shirts, send a picture of that in with your name. We'll put your name on the screen for those of us watching on video. If not, I'll read it out for the people who are listening to the audio version of this. Let's just kind of find out, like, who really hates Florida, whether it be your Gator Hater T-shirt or maybe you've got one of those old school great bumper stickers, a lot of negative Florida stuff. I've had even someone bring me one of those, one of our Marlowe's remotes before. Whatever picture you can take to sort of indicate your hatred for Florida, whether it be one of our shirts or something from your own, life and your own collection, send those in to me on Twitter at DawgNation Daily. We'll make sure we put those on the screen here. We'll give you some credit for it during our podcast and let folks know that there are a lot of Georgia fans who are just as excited as I am about what's going to happen 2 Saturdays from now and cannot wait for the cocktail party. And, of course, our big DawgNation invasion to Jacksonville, also a big part of that as well. What we don't know yet, though, is how healthy Georgia's going to be when it gets to that game, if you want to bring things back to sort of a serious conversation for a moment, including Terry Godwin, who did leave Saturday's game with what was called a rib injury and was apparently getting some x-rays underneath the stands there at Sanford Stadium. Chip Towers alluded to this a moment ago, but here's what Kirby Smart said about the injury to Godwin immediately after the game on Saturday night.
Yeah, he's got a rib injury. I think he'll be fine. He had to go check it to get it checked out and get it x-rayed, and I think he should be fine.
When Chip Towers was on the show a moment ago, he alluded to Kirby Smart's use of the word fine. You really heard Kirby use that word twice, and what Chip said a moment ago was that Kirby's probably not using that word fine unless he truly thought Terry Godwin was going to be fine. I think this is probably one of those moments when, to use a bad cliche, that the bye week does come in a good time for Georgia. This would feel like the kind of thing, no matter what the specificity of the injury is, that time would probably help it here. I'm no doctor, I'm no medical expert, but I'm guessing that if Terry Godwin is going to be sort of taking it easy over the course of the next couple of weeks, at least a little bit, it sort of increases his likelihood for being able to play next Saturday against Florida. And I believe that even with Jake Fromm on the rise here as a quarterback, you still want a healthy, full complement of wide receivers, and that includes Terry Godwin. Now, the position group that Georgia's even more injured at than wide receiver, though, is on the defensive line. We went into Saturday knowing that Trent Thompson was not going to play. At a certain point in the game, Tyler Clark exited and then came back in. But to add a couple more names to that list, you also had, David Marshall and Daquan Hawkins-Muckle, a couple other guys who kind of contribute on the defensive line, slightly different ways, but both up front for the Georgia defense. They didn't play either. Kirby Smart didn't say much about why, but it did allow this.
They both got injuries, undisclosed injuries. But hate it for them because they're both good players and could have helped us tonight.
Yeah, so, you've quickly taken what was a real strength for Georgia, the depth along its defensive line, and all of a sudden if you start scratching guys off with injury, that doesn't quite feel quite like such a deep strength anymore. So that'll be another thing that Georgia fans pay attention to over the course of the next couple of weeks. Just how healthy can this defensive line get? Because we know how big the Florida game is, and we know that Georgia wants all hands on deck going into that particular football game. By the way, to wrap up the show here today, speaking of Florida, something else that, I don't know, this probably shouldn't even bother me that much, but I at least wanted to mention this. So, on that college game day final show that they do every Saturday on ESPN, I used to watch this thing religiously back in the day. The truth is, I don't really stay up late enough to watch this thing on most Saturdays anymore when I'm home. And when Georgia has one of these late home games, I don't get home in time to see it anyway. You're home late from a football game when college game day final is already over, but the last few home games, that's been the case. But on this show is former Florida quarterback Jesse Palmer. How about this? And like I said, I shouldn't even probably care about this, but I kind of do. On his, sort of who's in the college football playoff right now, they do 5 teams, the team sort of closest to get in and the 4 that would be in. He had Georgia 4th on his list right now and had TCU ahead of Georgia. Joey Galloway had Georgia 3rd, the same place as ranked in both polls. Is this the former Gator just sliding Georgia on purpose here? Either way, I didn't like it. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. And for those of you who are with us on video right now, look forward to talking to you. You can weigh in on kind of anything that you want to talk about. Hank Watson guessed. That's pretty smart, Hank. He guessed what I was going to say about Jesse Palmer before I even said it. I think there's 2 things about that. A, I'm probably pretty predictable at times that I would take the bait on that. And B, that is it does feel like a little bit of a slide. I mean, a coincidence that the only guy right now in the country who doesn't have Georgia number 3, and some people might even make a case for Georgia to be higher than that, maybe even higher than Penn State at number 2, but the only guy who doesn't have Georgia 3 is the former Florida quarterback Jesse Palmer. I don't know. Darian Ford says you can't believe Palmer, and I think that's probably a pretty good piece of advice. Charles Kaiser says TCU isn't even that good. Oklahoma will beat them. Well, plus, Charles, here's the other thing. Georgia just beat TCU. I mean, let's not act like these teams played like 17 years ago. They played in December. It was less than a year ago, and Georgia won that game. So, this notion of they just played head-to-head, and I know I'm taking this way too seriously. I'm half kidding when I even say this, so please, don't think I'm reading too much into it. But it's not like we have no idea how these two teams would perform head-to-head against each other. A much inferior Georgia team to the one now played TCU not that long ago on a neutral site and won the game. So I feel like there's a little bit of evidence to suggest that Georgia ought to be ranked higher than TCU. Trent Ayers asked about the Florida offense. How is it similar to Missouri? Here's the one thing I'll say about the Florida offense, and you'll hear me say this in some form or fashion the next couple of weeks. They are not very good, but Franks has a strong enough arm to challenge Georgia deep down the field. Now, does Florida have the kind of wide receivers the way that Missouri does to get open against Georgia's secondary? Honestly, I don't know about that. It depends on if Cleveland's healthy enough to play. It depends on, probably a lot of factors there. But Franks, while he's not a great quarterback, is kind of a big-armed quarterback. You saw the Hail Mary he threw against Tennessee. So he does have the big arm that you at least have to give a little respect to. Although, somebody said this to me on Twitter. This is kind of pretty amazing. I wish I could pull this up. The truth is I'm not going to be able to pull this up in time, and I'm going to botch the stat. So whoever sent this, I apologize for screwing this up. But something along the lines of, I guess Florida's only thrown 5 touchdown passes all season. 2 of those came with Kentucky essentially not having a secondary on the field. They weren't even covering 2 of Florida's receivers. That's 2 of them. The other one is the Hail Mary throw against Tennessee. And other than that, it's only like 2 other touchdown throws for Florida all year long. That's how inept the Florida offense has been. That's a shocking number. Someone had that on Twitter, and they sent it to me. Leighton Lewis says, doubt Florida scores more than 10 on our defense. That may be true. Will Fletcher reminding us that not only did Georgia beat TCU last year, it beat Penn State the year before that. Now, this Penn State team's better than that Penn State team was, but I guess the point is this Georgia team's also a lot better, too. Josh Rowan said, I missed what Palmer said. Where can I find it? On Twitter. So, Josh, here's what's going to be kind of disappointing. He didn't really offer much of an explanation for why he ranked TCU ahead of Georgia in the part that I saw. You can go to ESPN.com, and they should have like a video link to that particular segment. He just sort of, he didn't say anything bad about Georgia. He didn't really explain why TCU above Georgia. And I think a lot of times, as someone who's kind of done some of these TV things before, not the level that Jesse Palmer's doing this, but I've done, enough of these, cable TV yak fests to tell you that sometimes you just sort of have to be different. Both guys can't have the same exact top 4. You got to make it a little bit different. So maybe Palmer, the Florida quarterback, volunteered to leapfrog Georgia because that was kind of on brand for him. He didn't offer much of an explanation for why Georgia would be downgraded in his mind, and it could have been that they just needed somebody to have something a little different. Because other than that, I think they both have the exact same top 5s. Charles Kaiser says that Tim Tebow gave Lorenzo Carter the Freak of the Week award. Well, there you go. I didn't realize that Tebow was dispensing with Freaks of the Week, but it's nice to know that he recognizes what Lorenzo Carter does. Trent Ayers says, how banged up is Florida on the defensive side of the ball? That's a good question. I think that most people tell you that the Florida defensive line is still pretty good. Now, I guess that Sherritt's hurt now. Is that right? I better not say that. The truth is, I don't know. Where did I get that from? Some of y'all may know that. But they are pretty deep along that defensive line. For instance, like Antonius Clayton is only like one of the guys in the mix as a backup role, even though he's a pretty big prospect coming out of high school. So they're pretty deep along the defensive line. I know some Florida fans haven't been incredibly happy with the linebackers this year, and this secondary is such a far cry from what it used to be. That the secondary when you had Wilson and Tabor and the safety who's in Atlanta now, when you had all those guys, this was quite the group. I mean, it's basically Duke Dawson now and 3 guys named Mo. Dustin Goodwin says, if we went out in the regular season and lose in Alabama the SEC championship game, we only have one loss, the number one team in the country. We have to be in the playoff. So, yeah, I mean, it is going to be one of those interesting debates here about, could the SEC that most people think of as kind of a down league, down year for sure. I mean, there's only going to be, I guess LSU slides in at the bottom half of the top 25 in at least the coaches poll, but there's not a ton of teams ranked, and there's really not a ton of teams who are threats to be ranked at the moment. But could there still somehow be maybe an opportunity to get a couple SEC teams into the college football playoff? That is one of those debates you're probably going to hear a lot more about here in the days ahead, I would guess. Nicholas House says you saw Tebow ball up the shirt. So SEC Nation was in Athens on Saturday, and I guess y'all tell me, some of y'all may have been there, you may have watched the show. I was on my way to Athens when this was happening, but I guess Kirby gave the Junkyard Dog Savage T-shirts out to everybody, and he gave Tebow a small. If so, that's kind of a fun thing to do. Danny Tucker said they said Lorenzo Carter is the second fastest player on the team. Who is the fastest? I'm guessing McCole. Is that the fastest player on Georgia's roster? Is it one of those defensive backs that hasn't played yet? Is it Amir Speed? No pun intended with his last name. I would say it's probably in the conversation of am I leaving somebody obvious out? I think Crumpton's probably more quick than fast. I think that Hardman, when Hardman took the in around on Saturday, I mean, he is such a blur. The way he kind of came around and sort of, put that toe in the turf and, cut it forward. All of a sudden, I mean, he looked like he had on, jet speed afterburners. He's a fast player in game speed, I'll tell you that. Maybe Kevin Elder said Isaiah Wilson's the fastest. By the way, Jeremy Jackson says that Sherritt is hurt for Florida and out for the season with a hip injury. Out for the season. Wow. Wow, that's a big one. Casey Dover also saying Roquan Smith would be up there. In terms of game speed, Roquan plays about as fast as anybody can. And, y'all know what I'm talking about when I say game speed. There are a lot of guys who have that sort of track speed, practice speed. You put them in a straight line, they're going to run really, really fast. But maybe not everybody plays that way. I mean, think about if you're old enough to remember when Jerry Rice was a great NFL wide receiver. If you clocked him on a 40 time, he was not that fast. But no one ever caught up to him when he caught the football. He would always outrun people. He just sort of had a way of playing faster. Now, Roquan's a better athlete. I'm talking about physical athlete than Jerry Rice was, even if he's not quite the same caliber of player yet. But Roquan's game speed is shocking. The degree to which that he closes ground. I mean, he can be a perfect sort of inside linebacker, spying the quarterback, staying at home, watching the play develop, and he can wait until the last possible nanosecond to make his move because he's so good at closing. I mean, he is such a joy to watch. I hope he gets national award attention simply for the fact that I just think he's deserving of it. Inside linebackers, it's tough because you'll rack up tackles, but you don't get sacks, and you don't always even get tackles for loss. Those are the ways that you get the attention of the media sometimes, or the voting public on a lot of these awards. And Roquan just doesn't get to do enough of that kind of stuff, but he makes it possible for other people to do it. I mean, he is the engine that moves this Georgia defense right now. Santiago Diarn on McCole says he's electric. We need to target him more. Maybe Saturday was the start of that. Nick Bonanno on Roquan saying, I hope he comes back next year. It'd be nice to see. And, I guess, Nick, on that front, I don't follow the NFL draft quite as closely as I used to. I mean, how many inside linebackers are first-round picks? I mean, you don't see that many inside guys go as first-round draft picks in the NFL anymore, right? It's more of that's become less of a glamour position in the NFL, and I could be completely wrong about that, but I don't think I'm totally wrong on that. And so maybe this is one of those things where it can work two ways for you. He's worked his way as high in the draft as he's ever going to get to work, so why not go now and get that paycheck going? Or he thinks with one more year at Georgia, I could kind of put myself in that sort of rarefied air of the kid from Texas that was taken in the first round by the Chiefs a few years ago, the kid from Ole Miss that was taken by the 49ers. Maybe he kind of puts himself in that category a little bit. Julie Oden Thornton asks a good question. What was the main problem with our passing defense in the first half? So, Julie, here's my point on this. And I think we're going to talk about this some more tomorrow on the show and kind of the regular broadcast portion. I'm a big believer that there is an element of Georgia's pass defense that can't be corrected during the season. This wasn't, as Kirby Smart called it, a wake-up call in my mind. This is a group that's eventually going to kind of play back to what its level is. You know, you've got guys in the Georgia secondary who played way above what you would expect from them. 3-star recruits who played much better than that. Former walk-ons who played much better than that. But at a certain point in time, you know, your profile is what it is for a reason, and you are going to have a hard time winning every individual one-on-one matchup. I believe that when Georgia goes into its most important games at the end of October through November into December and January, I think this defense is going to have to coach around this a little bit and play around a secondary that's just less than perfect. And no team is totally perfect. No team has every single issue completely fixed and completely as high as it would want to be. Everyone's got a weakness or a vulnerability, and it just so happens that the Georgia secondary is its weakness, is its vulnerability. And hopefully, much like the Notre Dame game and some of the other games, the Mississippi State game that Georgia's played this season, the front seven can be strong enough that the secondary doesn't matter quite as much. Sean Thomas asked about Bellamy and the club around his hand. So I believe that Bellamy, and y'all see the players' tweets better than I do. I don't usually see the players' tweets until after the fact. I'm not as active on social media as some of y'all are, but I did see where Bellamy tweeted out that the club is gone. So I'm guessing against Florida in 2 weeks, the tape wrapped around his hand, that club, I'm guessing that he will not be playing with that. Steve Archer asked about the possibility of Bobby Petrino to Tennessee. I think Petrino's looking to move. I don't know that Tennessee can hire Petrino, though. You know, Petrino's got a lot of baggage, man. Whether it be, I don't know, you know, the way he's kind of hopped around jobs, the embarrassing manner in which he left the Arkansas job. He's got a lot of negative stuff, a lot of baggage, and I'm not quite sure that Tennessee can take that on. A program of a lesser stature like a Louisville can kind of bring him back. You know, Louisville's essentially an AAU program in athletics anyway. They seem to tolerate a lot of stuff, and tolerating Bobby Petrino seems to be fine for that program. But I don't know that Tennessee, who probably cares more about its image than Louisville cares about its, I don't know that Tennessee can do that, even though Petrino's obviously a very good coach. And it is worth pointing out that with Jurich, how you say his name, the Louisville AD losing his job in the basketball scandal, that the Bobby Petrino buyout was tied to Jurich's employment there. And with him gone, there is the thought that Petrino could be back on the open market here again. But I just don't know that Tennessee would be the fit for that, even though Petrino is a good enough coach to make Tennessee much better very quickly. Chris Standridge echoing the thoughts of a lot of Georgia fans when he says, keep Butch Jones there. And yeah, I know a lot of people would love to see that. Santiago D. Arn asked about Tennessee going after Mike Bobo. I believe somebody will go after Bobo. Colorado State's pretty good on the field. Maybe not quite as good on the field as it was under Jim McElwain, but Bobo is a much better recruiter in Fort Collins, Colorado than McElwain ever was. And that's the reason why Bobo is ultimately going to get a job, is because he's a good recruiter. He's getting players to Colorado State. That's not an easy thing to do. He's still recruiting the South some. He has gone out to West, and he's made himself look like a football coach. And so I think that he's going to be in the mix for a Tennessee. He'll probably get an interview. In the mix for an Ole Miss, probably get an interview. He may be on enough of a fast track that he could turn the Ole Miss job down, because Ole Miss, while it's probably a pretty good job in that you'll be given a few years to get better, you'll earn a paycheck while these NCAA issues are kind of unfolding, and you would assume you get a little extra patience there than you would at maybe some other jobs. Bobo may be enough of a fast track guy, much like Jeremy Pruitt, the former Georgia defensive coordinator, that they could even turn down the Ole Miss job because they feel like another job better is coming at some point in time. Let me hit some more comments here, then we'll get it ready to get out of here. Tony Porter says, don't think Tennessee would hire Bobo. He sounds too much like Derek Dooley. Here's the thing about the Derek Dooley hire for Tennessee, though. Ultimately, the reason why that program got sort of thrown into the dump the way that it did was not all Derek Dooley's fault. Tennessee was forced to hire Derek Dooley, a coach that didn't really have that good of a record at Louisiana Tech. I mean, he wasn't winning games at Louisiana Tech. He wasn't bringing in players. He was just sort of a semi-competent coach at Louisiana Tech. But Tennessee had to settle for a guy that was willing to come to work and take over all those long-term contracts for all those assistants that Tennessee had to hire when it hired Lane Kiffin. I mean, Lane Kiffin is still the coach most to blame for Tennessee's failure. Because when he came in, young as he was, had just been a disaster with the Oakland Raiders. In order to make the Kiffin hire seem better, they had to hire what was sort of thought of as this dream team staff. His dad, Monty Kiffin, is defensive coordinator. Orgeron was on that staff, or am I making that up? Maybe I'm making that part up. There are a lot of these sort of big-name guys, big-name assistants who were kind of, brought in to kind of do this stuff, and they were all given these multi-year deals to kind of make them want to come work for Lane Kiffin. Then Kiffin bolts after 1 year, and Tennessee cannot afford to fire all these assistants because you got to pay them out this money. So the next coach was forced to kind of come in, could not pick his own staff, had to take over the staff that was already in place there. And not many coaches were willing to do that. But to get into the SEC, Derek Dooley was, and you see the ultimate results. You had to settle for a coach that was willing to settle for you, and a few years later, you were just a total embarrassment as a program. That, for me, was more Kiffin's fault than it was Dooley's. Dooley would be a fool not to take the job. It was the best job he was ever going to be offered. So that's kind of the situation there for me. Tony Porter brings up a good name for Tennessee. And this is the name, if you're a Georgia fan, that ought to scare you a little bit. T. Martin, the current USC offensive coordinator. That's the kind of guy that could potentially come back south and be a factor in recruiting in a way that Tennessee's just not right now. The Tennessee players from Georgia are not players that Georgia was targeting. I mean, compare Tennessee to Clemson for a moment. Clemson just got Joseph Charleston for the class of 2019. Charleston's brother plays baseball at Tennessee, and he's going out of the state of Georgia to play college football, and it's not Tennessee, it's Clemson. Tennessee's a total non-factor in recruiting right now. I don't care what the rankings say. From a getting players that matter standpoint, Tennessee's a total non-factor. But they would not be a non-factor if T. Martin came in here anyway. At least that's what I believe. We'll finish with this one. Alan Verbanchik says, would love to see Georgia shut Florida out. Listen, I cannot wait for 2 weeks from now. Cannot wait for the idea of this Georgia defense. Hopefully, I'm not even going to get greedy and call for shutouts or things like that. I am just going to say that I am really excited about seeing what the Dogs can do against Florida in 2 weeks. Not because I don't think Florida will play hard, not because I think that Florida's, sort of given up on the season. My guess is they'll come in ready to challenge Georgia much like Missouri did on Saturday. But this is a Georgia team that has been preparing itself for moments like these, and I can't wait to see it. Thanks for letting me talk to you about it. Hope you'll be back with us at 10 a.m. again tomorrow for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live. Love to see you at 3 p.m. Eastern Time today on the SEC Country Facebook page for AT&T's SEC Country Live. If you missed a portion of our broadcast, make sure you check it out at DawgNation.com. We'll also post it at iTunes, SoundCloud, or if you're in the Athens area in about an hour, you can listen to us on the radio as well. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. and hope you all have a great day.